evening, beautiful humans. I'm Mary Laura Cato, and this is the Melanin Culture, the hallowed ground where ordinary people of melanin get to share their extraordinary stories, passions, genius, gifts, and their unique insight into the human experience. It is also the space where we have raw, honest discussions on daily topics that affect us all and actually need wider and greater discussion. Now, let's get straight to the TMC stories to hear from our exceptional guests. My third and final guest for tonight is Annie Kabamba. Annie is an Australian Congolese fine artist and high school teacher. She possesses a reckless abandonment to art, writing, creating, and perceiving. Her mission is to dispel the myth that art is exclusive. Tonight, she will be speaking on the detriment of existing in spaces where you are not reflected in the faces and the lives like your own.
I guess I've always considered myself as someone very culturally aware in terms of immersing myself in diverse cultural experiences and social interactions. From my early years as a family, perhaps due to our heritage, but certainly because we were one of the first African immigrants to arrive to Australia at the time, we attracted a lot of attention, but more to the point, it caused others within multiracial communities to gravitate towards us. We soon found ourselves engaged in this beautiful cultural exchange of sounds and tastes and in integrating our customary practices and local traditions. I recall my late mama trading recipes and making house calls and inviting others over to sew garments with guests of Asian and Eastern European backgrounds. This exposure only heightened my awareness of cultural diversity. It expanded the depths of my relationships. I became very intentional about broadening my knowledge and understanding of the vast differences and similarities between individual groups and subgroups of people, especially when acknowledging Indigenous perspectives. This was my upbringing. This was my normal. When it came to the media, however, when it came to the public sphere and to cultural representations of race, ethnicity within society at large, it became quickly apparent how scarcely I saw someone of my origin, of my complexion, reflected back to me. Not on television, not in cinema, not even on the magazine covers, not as I browsed those beauty counters, not even in toy shelves. Everywhere that I looked, rarely did I see the representation of people of colour. I recall while working full-time and studying full-time, I was coming to the end of my teaching degree, and one of my co-workers asked a seemingly innocent question: what would you do if a student came to you and said, "Miss, you're black"? Not only was I shell-shocked, my co-worker persisted to validate themselves and say, "What? Kids can ask anything. You have to be prepared for anything." I didn't have a response that day. In fact, I went home after work with more questions than answers. Why, of all the questions, would they ask that of me? Was it racist on their part? Or was this person generally looking out for my best interests? Was it, as they claimed, a hypothetical question designed to prepare me for the teaching world? And the question that rattled me the most, if I were a white female teacher, would they have asked me the same question? Let's try that on for size. What would you do if a student approached you and said, "Miss, you're white"? What is it about a black teacher that warrants such a reaction? Was there a shortage of black teachers throughout this co-worker's upbringing? Or is it a question of a system flawed that does not recognise or provide opportunity for marginalised groups such as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders? Let's not forget our Asian Pacific or refugee communities, including Middle Eastern or African peoples such as myself. Or does the problem reside at a higher institutional level, where the public is constantly bombarded with a diminished view and misrepresentation of culture, including historical documentation that is heavily reliant on subconscious racial bias and white supremacy? It was many years to follow before I found the words to articulate this disconnect, until the youngest of my sisters shared a quote by the Dominican American writer Junot Diaz. He ponders over this notion of monsters and mirrors and goes on to say, and I quote, "You know, vampires have no reflection in a mirror. There's this idea that monsters don't reflect in a mirror. And what I've always thought isn't that monsters don't have reflections in a mirror, it's that if you want to make a human being into a monster, deny them at the cultural level any reflection of themselves. And growing up, I felt like a monster in some ways. I didn't see myself reflected at all. I was like, yo, is something wrong with me? That the whole society seemed to think that people like me don't exist? And what part that inspired me was this deep desire that before I died, I would make a couple of mirrors. That I would make some mirrors that kids like me might see themselves reflected back and might not feel so monstrous for it. And so I ask you this, am I the monster? Should the color of my flesh so offend the world that they need to question my credibility as a professional, more or less a human being? When you say you don't see race, yet I am invisible until the color of my skin becomes a problem, who then are the true monsters?
Thank you for watching The Melanin Culture. We are building a community and a platform that celebrates and showcases ordinary people and the extraordinary stories, gifts, genius, insight and experiences that they have across the city and across this country at large. So if you or anyone that you know has a story or a gift or experience that they want to share and connect with others, then email us at themelanculture@gmail.com. It's on the screen and it's in the bio. We would love to hear from you. So like, comment, share, and join the culture.